They say faith can build empires. But what happens when that faith is wielded as a shield for darkness, a truth that becomes a weapon? In the sprawling ambition and shadowed corners of Atlanta, one woman discovered that some wounds are inflicted not with a fist, but with a silent, unseen truth. And some betrayals are irreversible. The citadel of hope rose against the Atlanta skyline, its grand facade gleaming in the morning sun, a spiritual anchor for countless souls. At its heart stood Reverend Elias Sterling, 48, a man whose presence commanded a room and whose eloquent sermons resonated far beyond the sanctuary. He moved among his flock with an air of profound grace, a beloved figure, the very embodiment of spiritual leadership. Yet behind the public adoration, a different kind of authority took root. Eunice Jacobs, 32, sat at her desk just steps from his private office, a model of composure. Her schedules were flawless, her files meticulously organized. No one knew the silent truth she carried, a relentless battle against a virus contracted years ago, and the constant weight of mounting medical bills for her ailing mother. This job, serving as Reverend Sterling's executive assistant, was her lifeline. She needed it with a desperation that silenced every instinct for escape. The first comments began subtly, like a soft breeze turning cold. "Eunice, that dress highlights your grace," he'd murmur, his gaze lingering a moment too long. "You have such a radiant spirit." She'd offer a polite, "Thank you, Reverend," her eyes fixed on donation reports, trying to divert his attention. But the breeze stiffened into a chill wind. His hand would brush hers accidentally as he passed papers. He found reasons to keep her late for confidential ministry work, long after other staff had departed. The heavy oak door to his office, once often ajar, now clicked shut with unsettling frequency, enclosing them in a private quiet. Eunice felt a knot tighten in her stomach each time. One evening, as twilight bled through the stained glass windows, Reverend Sterling moved closer, cornering her between her desk and the filing cabinet. His voice dropped to a seductive whisper, the sound itself a violation. "Eunice," he breathed, his proximity suffocating. "Divine Providence has shown me a special path for us, a very private one." Eunice's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a shrinking cage. The true danger, stark and inescapable, had finally revealed itself. Eunice found Reverend Sterling after the Tuesday evening Bible study, catching him alone in a quiet hall. "Reverend," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I need to discuss our interactions. They are making me uncomfortable." He turned, his smile fixed. "Eunice, my dear, our connection is a special gift, divinely guided. God directs my spirit." She pushed back. "Reverend, you are a married man. Rosalind is a pillar of this community." He merely chuckled, a dismissive sound. "My wife understands my spiritual obligations." His charm, once a polished facade, hardened into something cold. "Eunice," he said, stepping closer, his voice dropping, "you understand the importance of this position, don't you? The benefits, the salary, especially with your mother's condition. Many would give anything to sit where you sit." The thinly veiled threat hung in the air. He implied her performance reviews, her very livelihood rested solely on his approval. Trapped, Eunice felt the walls close in. She discreetly applied for a transfer to the church's outreach program, hoping to escape his orbit. She even tried adjusting her work hours, citing family needs. Both requests met swift, polite denials from the administration, approvals that came directly from Reverend Sterling. With no other recourse, fueled by growing fear and a stark need to protect herself, a new resolve settled within her. She began meticulously documenting every inappropriate text, every late-night call, every unsettling remark. A hidden device in her purse captured crucial conversations, a silent witness to his escalating disregard. Reverend Sterling's voice, crisp and formal, broke through her thoughts the following morning. "Eunice, my office, please. I'm concerned about your recent lack of spiritual alignment. Perhaps this isn't the right fit." His words, carefully chosen, aimed directly at her most vulnerable point. The implied threat of termination loomed heavy, leaving Eunice devastated, utterly cornered. The phone call from the Citadel of Hope the following day was cold, formal. Reverend Sterling, through a secretary, confirmed her position was no longer a good fit. He'd crafted it as a mutual parting, a generous offer of a quiet exit if she simply accepted. The subtle threat was clear: fight, and her professional standing would suffer. That night, Eunice sat alone in her quiet apartment. Her mother's hospital bills lay scattered on the coffee table. Her gaze fell upon the amber bottle of HIV medication, reflecting the dim light. A cold, terrifying resolve began to solidify in her mind. The next morning, Eunice made a call. Her voice, carefully modulated, conveyed a tremor of regret, a hint of vulnerability. She spoke of missing the Citadel, of a desire for reconnection. Reverend Sterling's response was immediate, laced with an almost predatory eagerness that made her stomach churn. But she heard only opportunity. They arranged a discreet dinner for that Friday at a dimly lit restaurant nestled in the old Fourth Ward, miles from the Citadel of Hope. Eunice arrived early, outwardly composed in the dress he'd once complimented. Her every move was a calculated step towards a singular, burning purpose. Over a glass of wine, Reverend Sterling laid out his rules. Their meetings would be strictly off book, never near the church. Rosalind's name, his wife, was forbidden. Discretion was paramount. Eunice listened, her face impassive, as her hidden recorder captured every word. She nodded, her agreement a silent, chilling promise. Later that night, in the hushed solitude of a boutique hotel room, Eunice watched Reverend Sterling sleep, his breathing even and deep. She leaned closer to her voice recorder, her whisper a ghost in the quiet. "Reverend Elias Sterling," she breathed, the words cutting like ice. "Beacon of the community, serial abuser. He's about to learn the hardest lesson of his life." She reached for her hidden journal, penning the date, marking it day 1 of the plan. A chilling pattern solidified over the following weeks. Tuesday evenings became counseling sessions at a downtown apartment. Sunday afternoons were ministry planning at a quiet cafe in the Garden District. Rosalind Sterling's frequent charity travels provided ample cover. Eunice played the part flawlessly, the reluctant congregant finally yielding, eyes downcast, voice soft. Each clandestine encounter, every one of Elias's casual dismissals of her health or concerns for protection, was meticulously documented. A digital footprint grew, a damning record of his brazen disregard. Eunice, now observing Elias with clinical precision, saw beyond her own violation. She noticed his practiced charm with other young women within the church, the closed office door during counseling sessions with single mothers. His use of spiritual language to manipulate and coerce became chillingly apparent. She understood with grim clarity, she was not the first, nor would she be the last. Rosalind Sterling, the Reverend's wife, began to spend more time at the Citadel. Her presence was a silent, watchful shadow. Her eyes would linger on Elias and Eunice a fraction too long. Subtle murmurs rippled through the congregation about Eunice's return to the Citadel's inner circle. Eunice felt the shift in atmosphere, a tightening of the air. One afternoon, Eunice called her cousin, Tamara Hayes, a nurse she trusted. Her confession was carefully edited, focused on Elias's manipulative control, hinting at the depths of his coercion. Tamara, sensing the deeper current, urged her to stop. "Eunice, this path, it will consume you," Tamara warned. But Eunice's voice held a hardened edge. "He tried to destroy me. Now he needs to learn." Elias, emboldened by Eunice's feigned compliance, grew more audacious. His late-night calls became explicit, his texts demanding. Eventually, he insisted on a meeting at his own opulent Buckhead mansion, while Rosalind was away at a conference. Eunice felt a surge of cold satisfaction. This was the opening she had waited for. She carefully saved his text message, the one casually mentioning he disabled the estate's security cameras for their privacy. Later, during a brief, poignant lunch with her recovering mother, Eunice forced a smile. The weight of her plan pressed down, a constant heavy presence. She saw the worry in her mother's eyes, a reminder of the threats Elias had used. That memory fueled her resolve, hardening her heart against any emerging doubt. Eunice sat in her car, the Georgia heat clinging to the evening air, directly outside Elias Sterling's mansion. She clicked on her small recorder. July 12th, 2022. Her voice was a flat whisper. 8:45 p.m. Entering Reverend Sterling's residence at his insistence. All security confirmed disabled. The streetlights cast sharp lines across the darkened facade of the house, a grand structure that held promises of privilege, now about to become a stage for a profound act of vengeance. Inside the Buckhead mansion, the master bedroom felt less like a sanctuary, more like a stage for a secret ritual. Family photographs on the dresser, Rosalind's silk robe tossed over a chair, all were ignored by Elias, who moved with an unthinking sense of entitlement. Eunice, maintaining her cold resolve, let her gaze sweep the opulent room before turning to him. "Aren't you ever worried about diseases? Or anything?" she asked, her voice calm, almost casual. He laughed, a dismissive, arrogant sound. "Eunice, I am a man of God. He protects his chosen ones." She noted his arrogance in her mind, another detail for her careful record. Within weeks, Elias began to change. First came the subtle fatigue, then night sweats that left his expensive shirts damp. A persistent low fever he dismissed as a summer flu. Eunice watched, clinically detached, as she noted each symptom in her private journal. A chilling satisfaction began to replace her initial apprehension. As Elias's health steadily declined, his demands on Eunice intensified. He grew weaker, more reliant on her presence, trusting her implicitly with scheduling and sensitive communications. "Sometimes I think you're the only one who truly knows me," he confided during a late-night call, his voice raspy. If only he knew, Eunice thought, the words a cold echo in her mind. Subtle changes began to show at the Citadel of Hope. Elias's once dynamic sermons shortened, his usual vigor replaced by a noticeable listlessness. He took more breaks during services, constantly reaching for a glass of water. The congregation began to whisper about his gaunt appearance, his often flushed face. Rosalind Sterling, returning from a charity gala, confronted him, urging a doctor's visit, but he waved off her concerns, attributing them to stress. By September, his symptoms were undeniable. During a private meeting at a quiet midtown hotel, he struggled to maintain focus, racked with uncontrollable chills. Eunice, observing his struggle, offered, "Perhaps we should call an ambulance, Reverend. You need a hospital." She knew exactly what they would find. He merely shook his head, refusing, his pride overriding his physical distress. Eunice wrote in her journal, "The virus is taking hold. He's experiencing classic acute symptoms, but his pride will be his downfall." Simultaneously at the Citadel of Hope, the deacon board called emergency meetings, and Associate Pastor Reverend Josiah Thorne began to assume more duties, his presence at the pulpit growing. A tremor of change was clearly being felt throughout the church. Reverend Josiah Thorne, the associate pastor, stepped more often into the pulpit, his sermons filling the void left by Elias's growing absences. His profile within the Citadel of Hope began to rise, creating a subtle shift in influence. Attendance numbers, once steady, now noticeably dropped as whispers about Elias's declining health spread like tendrils through the congregation. Eunice maintained her facade of concern, but deep inside, a profound hollowness had taken root, the bitter taste of a victory that brought no peace. She attended an HIV support group, sharing a carefully edited version of her own journey. An older woman, Mama Celeste, with eyes that seemed to see through pretense, looked directly at Eunice. "Revenge might feel sweet at first, child," Mama Celeste said, her voice soft but firm, "but it poisons the soul." Eunice left the meeting haunted by the words, a chill that had nothing to do with the Atlanta air. Elias's decline culminated dramatically. During a televised Sunday sermon, his voice faltered, his body swayed, and he nearly collapsed at the pulpit. The video clip instantly coursed through Atlanta's religious community, sparking widespread concern. Finally, Rosalind Sterling, witnessing the public humiliation, forced him to a private clinic tucked away in Buckhead. The call came late that night. Elias's voice, broken and defeated, reached Eunice. At a private room in Emory University Hospital, he sat slumped, a shadow of his former self. "HIV positive," he whispered, hollowly, disbelief etched onto his gaunt face. "How is this possible?" Eunice perfected her practiced shock, offering empty words of sympathy. Elias, still dazed, demanded Eunice get tested immediately. She calmly produced a recent negative test result, another piece of her meticulously planned deception. His relief was fleeting, quickly replaced by a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. Moments later, just outside his hospital room, Eunice overheard Rosalind confronting Elias, her voice raw with suppressed rage. "How many were there, Elias? How many?" Rosalind stormed out of the room, nearly colliding with Eunice in the sterile hallway, her eyes filled with accusation fixed on Eunice. "Here to check on your Reverend, Eunice?" her voice dripping venom. "I've had private investigators following Elias for months. Every hotel, every counseling session, I know everything. And now someone gave my husband HIV. When I find out who, she'll pay." Eunice retreated to her car, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Rosalind's threat, her private investigation, revealed a massive, unforeseen complication. She immediately pulled out her phone, dialing Tamara. "Rosalind knows about everything," she whispered, desperation lacing her voice. "She has proof. This wasn't part of the plan." Against medical advice, Reverend Elias Sterling discharged himself from Emory University Hospital. Rosalind Sterling, her face a mask of cold fury, moved out of the Buckhead mansion. The Citadel of Hope, once a beacon, descended into chaos. Attendance plummeted, its grand halls echoing with emptiness. News vans, their satellite dishes gleaming, besieged the cathedral's entrance, their cameras hungry for any glimpse of the disgraced pastor. Rosalind, without hesitation, filed a criminal complaint with the Atlanta Police Department. The case landed on the desk of Detective Sergeant Ava Jenkins of the Atlanta PD's Special Victims Unit. Jenkins was a seasoned investigator, her gaze sharp, her understanding of Atlanta's intricate community power dynamics, particularly within its large church networks, profound. This was not her first time seeing faith twisted into a weapon. Jenkins began her interrogations. Rosalind Sterling, hardened by years of unspoken pain, revealed Elias's long history of infidelity, justifying her earlier use of private investigators. Church staff were questioned, their nervous testimonies painting a consistent pattern. Young, attractive assistants frequently hired, then mysteriously departing after only a few months. Former assistant Nia, her voice trembling with trauma, broke down, recounting Elias's calculated manipulation, his veiled threats. Jenkins compiled a list of potential victims. Eunice Jacobs' name stood out. Her previous departure, her unexpected return, her presence during Elias's diagnosis, her continued close work with him despite her initial complaints. Jenkins called Eunice in. Eunice sat opposite the detective, outwardly calm and collected, maintaining her innocence. She claimed she returned to the Citadel for better terms, driven by her mother's medical bills, and hinted subtly at the coercion she had endured. Then, without fanfare, she stated, "I believe I've said all I can without legal counsel." She promptly called her newly hired lawyer, attorney Malik Jones, ending the interview. Jenkins, undeterred, subpoenaed phone records, hotel receipts, and the labyrinthine church financials. A disturbing pattern emerged. Cash withdrawals, payments to various women disguised as ministry support. The paper trail connected Elias to multiple individuals, but the HIV transmission timeline remained ambiguous. With multiple women, multiple sources, definitive links were elusive. It was a frustrating dead end. Tamara Hayes, Eunice's cousin, walked into Detective Jenkins's office, her face pale, racked with visible guilt. She took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper, yet each word cut through the silence. "I have information about Reverend Sterling's HIV infection. My cousin Eunice. She's been positive since 2017. She told me her plan. She intentionally infected him." Based on Tamara's confession, Detective Jenkins secured a search warrant for Eunice's apartment. The evidence was overwhelming. They found 5 meticulously filled notebooks detailing Elias's every word and action. USB drives held countless recordings. They found hotel receipts, screenshots of text messages, and a timeline of Elias's health in a hidden folder. The most damning entries were chilling in their precision, detailing Eunice's intent. Eunice sensed the net tightening around her. She changed her routines, used burner phones, and met frequently with her lawyer, attorney Malik Jones. She was a woman prepared for a fight. Anonymous letters hinting at her HIV status and vengeful intent began to surface at the Citadel of Hope, fueling the firestorm of speculation. Then, new witnesses came forward. Another former victim named Serafina approached Jenkins, stating Eunice had confided in her about the plan. Then came the critical complication. Serafina and Jasmine, another victim, revealed Elias had infected them in 2019 and 2020, respectively, years before Eunice's return to the church. The timeline, once so clear, was now hopelessly blurred. In a pretrial hearing, Dr. Imani Reed, a leading infectious disease specialist, took the stand. She testified that, given Elias's multiple partners and the nature of virus mutation, a definitive who infected whom was scientifically impossible with the available samples. The evidence suggested Elias might have been positive long before 2022. Elias, now frail but receiving treatment, held a press conference. He admitted to sins, but claimed he never intended to harm anyone. He cast Eunice as a calculated, evil mastermind who had targeted him, a public figure. Attorney Jones now had powerful ammunition. Elias's documented history of abuse, the clear pattern of coercion, and the revelation that other women had been infected years earlier. The narrative shifted from a clear-cut act of revenge to a complex web of deceit. During the pretrial motions, Judge Roberta Ellis delivered a momentous ruling. Elias's long pattern of manipulative behavior and the evidence of other HIV exposures would be admissible in court. The case, once a simple matter of revenge, now teetered on a knife's edge. The trial's outcome was intensely uncertain. The trial of Eunice Jacobs opened in a packed Atlanta courtroom, every seat filled with anxious onlookers, reporters, and members of the Citadel of Hope. Prosecutor Counselor Alani Carter laid out the state's case. Eunice had weaponized her HIV status, meticulously planning a biological assault against Reverend Elias Sterling. Attorney Malik Jones, for the defense, countered immediately. Eunice was a victim of a man who used his power to exploit. If any transmission occurred, it was through acts he initiated, and strong evidence suggested he might have infected others long before Eunice's return. The prosecution's case began to crack under pressure. Tamara Hayes, under cross-examination, hesitated, admitting Eunice hadn't explicitly said infect, but rather that he needed to understand the consequences. Dr. Imani Reed, the infectious disease specialist, reaffirmed the scientific ambiguity of transmission, stating definitively proving who infected whom was not possible. The defense's position grew stronger. Nia, Serafina, and Jasmine took the stand, each describing their abuse by Elias and their own HIV diagnoses, dating back to 2019 and 2020. Rosalind Sterling's testimony, intended to condemn Eunice, inadvertently aided the defense, as she recounted Elias exhibiting symptoms even before Eunice's return to his office. Eunice herself testified publicly. Her voice was calm, acknowledging her anger and humiliation, but she denied giving Elias HIV. She maintained her primary purpose was gathering evidence of his consistent pattern of abuse. "The journals were my rage, my fantasy for retribution," she stated, her gaze steady. "But I didn't give him HIV. He gave it to me." The prosecution struggled to prove clear intent and a definitive transmission chain. During the 4-day deliberation, church documents surfaced, revealing years of internal complaints against Elias, hidden payoffs, and systematic cover-ups. Deacon board minutes showed they had knowledge of other exposures, but had prioritized protecting the ministry's image. After 4 days, the jury returned. The verdict was not guilty on all counts. Judge Roberta Ellis addressed Eunice directly. While your actions showed poor judgment, the evidence presented does not support criminal charges. The story of Elias Sterling, Eunice Jacobs, and the Citadel of Hope rippled through Atlanta. The Citadel itself split, a significant portion of its congregation following Associate Pastor Josiah Thorne to a new ministry. Rosalind Sterling's divorce settled out of court, its terms confidential. The entire church board resigned en masse. Multiple civil suits from other victims against Elias and the church ended in confidential settlements. Reverend Elias Sterling, his reputation shattered, moved to a different state, attempting to build a restoration ministry far from public scrutiny. State lawmakers, prompted by the public outcry, proposed reforms to HIV criminalization laws. Eunice, seeking true peace, left Atlanta, moving to a new city to start fresh. Her final journal entry, penned quietly in her new apartment, reflected on the events. The truth is messy. We were all victims and villains. He destroyed lives with his abuse. I wanted justice, but found only emptiness. May God forgive us all. Mama Celeste's words from months before proved prophetic. Revenge had poisoned everyone it touched. The story became a cautionary tale about power, accountability, and the destructive nature of vengeance, but also about human resilience in the face of profound wrong. This case, set against the backdrop of Atlanta, offers a stark look at the consequences of unchecked power and the complex, often destructive nature of vengeance. It forces us to confront difficult questions about accountability, morality, and the choices made when pushed to the brink. What are your thoughts on this case? Was justice truly served or merely avoided? Share your perspective in the comments below, and if you found this story compelling, like this video and subscribe to 247 True Crime Chronicles for more true crime stories.